Greetings and welcome to another impressions video here at Words About Games, and today we're going to be looking at the Return of the Obra Dinn. In Return of the Obra Dinn, you play as an insurance assessor tasked with determining the fate of the 60 people aboard the Obra Dinn, a ghost ship that mysteriously appears in port 4 years after it vanished without a trace. You'll board the ship and explore, piecing together what happened to everyone on board during its fateful voyage. This is an incredibly smart, stupendously well put together detective game, which is probably as close to a game will ever get to making you feel like an actual detective. Instead of simply having you hunt down highlighted objects or clues using some sort of supernatural detective vision, your only tools in Obra Dinn are your own powers of deductive reasoning, critical thinking, and puzzle solving. Well, plus a compass that lets you relive the last few seconds of a dead person's life. You'll hear any dialogue that occurred during the last moments of their life and then be able to see the exact moment of their death, exploring a moment frozen in time and using that to put together the context of who they were, what killed them, and what the heck was going on around them when they died. Some pieces of the puzzle are simple. Figuring out the man in front of you was crushed by a cannon or shot in the head isn't terribly difficult when you're looking right at the moment of their demise. But figuring out their identity or the identity of their killer is the tricky part, and that's where the real beauty of Obra Dinn's magnificently challenging gameplay comes in. Aside from the opening chapter of the game, which exists just to get you used to the various ways in which you can deduce the information you need, putting together the pieces of the puzzle is an exercise in deduction, observation, and oftentimes making guesses based on the evidence you've acquired. So while it is obvious that someone was stabbed, figuring out who they were or who stabbed them will take a lot more work to figure out, usually requiring you to dive into the fates of various people before them, piecing together entire scenes before you can begin to identify the key players. Sometimes you'll even need to go back further, seeing how these people interact during events not linked to their own fates before you can figure out who they are. And it's wonderful. Obra Dinn forces you to think about every detail you see and hear because it's undoubtedly important for one reason or another. Even things like accents or how a character speaks or is spoken to by other characters can be the key to unmasking their identity. It's the kind of game that almost requires you keep a vast array of notes, the kind of notes that look like the crazy scrawlings of a mad person when viewed by someone out of the context of the game. There is an in-game journal that provides you with a lot of incredibly useful information. A crew manifest tells you the names and jobs of everyone aboard the Obra Dinn. A map will show you the entire layout of the ship itself and mark down areas you find bodies to help you visualize and keep track of where people died. There are also pictures of everyone on board. The journal also keeps track of the story as you uncover it. There are 10 key events split into multiple chapters, helping you keep track of the chronology of events, which you'll often discover out of order. The first event you'll investigate is the last thing that happened, for example, and the first person you'll identify is the last person who died on the ship. I've legitimately never known a game force you to actually do the heavy lifting in an investigation before. Obra Dinn works in a way no other detective game does, and actually makes you do the detective work yourself. Whereas in other games you'll need to solve relatively simple puzzles so that the protagonist can piece together what happened and then explain it to the player, or you'll simply need to follow clearly marked paths, there's nothing like that in Obra Dinn, and it's fantastic. It'll seem incredibly daunting at first, with a list of 60 names that mean nothing to you. But as you relive the calamities that befell the ship and its crew and passengers, you'll get to know these people. You'll have to if you want to figure out who they were. It's not just about figuring out who killed who. You need to dive deeper than that. There are a myriad of ways to determine someone's identity. Sometimes it's by figuring out their job, their motivations during a crisis, how they talk during a specific moment, or their relationship with another character. But it all comes down to getting to know them in some way or another. You'll genuinely feel like you're actually piecing together the fate of the Obra Dinn as you play, instead of letting the game pull you along its narrative, and that's because that's exactly what's happening. You can't brute force your way through by sheer guesswork either, as you'll need to correctly identify 3 people, their fates, and the identity of their killer in a row before the game will tell you if you've gotten it right. Throw in some terrific voice acting, which is a must when identifying a character can sometimes come down to their accent or the intonation in their voice when they're speaking to another person. Obra Dinn also features a wonderful soundtrack that routinely captures the mood of whatever's happening during any given moment you're viewing, and a wonderfully simplistic art style that developer Lucas Pope calls 1-bit graphics, and you've got an utterly delightful and incredibly captivating mystery game where player agency is the absolute driving force of the game. The only slight gripe I have with the game is exiting memories, which is done by finding a magical door that will transport you back to the present day. It's a little cumbersome having to find this door and use it every time, especially as you delve deeper into the game and want to revisit memories to piece everything together. However, this takes nothing away from what is an absolute masterclass in investigation-driven game design. The Return of the Obra Dinn is an utterly enchanting game, thanks to the way in which it puts your powers of deduction, puzzle solving and critical thinking at the forefront of solving its many mysteries. It's quite probably the only game that has ever made me feel like I'm actually solving a mystery, as opposed to jumping through hoops to get the game to reveal its answers to me. It's thoroughly, and without a doubt, one of the most engrossing games I've played all year, and if you have any interest in solving mysteries, I absolutely urge you to give it a look. Thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you've enjoyed it, please keep it here at Words About Games. We've got tons of content, including our weekly podcast, more impressions videos, patch notes, and our weekly indie game of the week. We also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. And most importantly, have a great day.